And then he asked me why. And it was that question, why am I so stressed still? And I realized it was finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19. And he tapped with me about my mother's death for about 15 minutes. Notice what you're feeling. And that's the first step. And I walked away being able to tell the story in my mind for the first time ever without the tears there.
You know, I think right now would be a perfect time to share that this podcast is officially sponsored. And this week's episode is brought to you by Juliana Barbati Consulting. Juliana is an expert in podcast SEO. She's worked with so many different podcasts and helped shows grow, helped shows get more eyes, helped shows get more ears, helped shows, get more followers. And I am honored to be working with her and have her team backing the podcast. So I'm very excited that they are the first advertiser to join the Round 2 podcast, first of many. So thank you, Juliana. And if you are looking for any sort of services to help your podcast grow, feel free to reach out to her. Her contact information is in the show notes. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Round 2 podcast. I am your host, Nikki Corbett, and with me today is Ann Hince. Ann, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nikki. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I've been telling people now that I've really got into my groove on Podmatch that I'm so grateful that I joined the platform because I've been connected with so many fantastic people who have these wonderful stories and they come and share them with me. So thank you for being one of those people.
You're welcome. It is a great, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm just been so impressed with how it's all worked out. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah. Great day here in California.
Yeah, it is. I know. California springs are tough to beat.
Indeed.
Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? Where are you originally from?
I was conceived in New Zealand.
Okay.
and my mother traveled back to England while she was pregnant with me.
Okay.
The first trimester.
Okay.
So I was born in England and moved around the world to different countries, Barbados, Sierra Leone in West Africa, then Hong Kong, and then Bahrain.
Okay. So, oh my gosh. Literally all over.
Right. So at the age of 16, I'd lived in all those different countries and in England.
Okay.
And then I moved out to California when I was 21.
All right.
I've been here ever since.
So why so much movement? Were you a military family or?
No, close. My dad worked with telecommunications. Do you remember those big old satellite stations, those massive white satellite stations? He used to work on those. So he worked around the world.
Okay. Wow. Those are some interesting places. I've not been to many of them, but Hong Kong still remains one of my favorite cities to visit in the world.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think it's changed a lot since I was there. They used to have all these amazing Chinese restaurants, obviously, and now they've got a lot of fast food places. So I
was there the summer of 2014. I had gone on a, I guess it was considered like a rotation, but I was working overseas on a short-term contract. It was like 3 months. And so I was based in Shenzhen, but it's right across the border from Hong Kong. So I went over there very often and it was hot. Like sometimes when people are like, oh, you don't want to go to, maybe like, I don't know, like Florida or Texas or Arizona or Tennessee or whatever in the summer. And I'm like, I've been in Hong Kong in the summer. And that was by far the hottest, wettest, just, you're outside and you're just dripping with sweat. And then you walk inside and you're cold because the AC's blaring, but your outfit's just literally soaked with sweat.
Right. It's hot and it's humid and it's very loud.
Yeah. Oh, but it was still such a fun time being, exploring that part of the world. So
nice.
Yeah. So California. So you could technically, I think you've been here long enough. You can call yourself a California girl, right?
I think so. I am a citizen. So hopefully that counts.
There you go.
Something.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So tell me a little bit about your journey.
Okay, so I had a lot of trauma. The talking about the different countries is the outside picture of my early years, but the inside picture was there was a lot of trauma, a lot of big traumatic events and smaller traumatic events, and they kind of culminated with finding my mother dead on the bathroom. But there were multiple other ones before that. For
Wow.
example, I was born with my right foot up against my right shin. So my whole body was torqued, twisted.
Okay.
And the first 6 weeks in life, that was kind of released through kind of physiotherapy type things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was handed over for adoption.
Oh my gosh.
To my family that actually didn't know that I'd had this foot issue.
Okay.
And I was adopted into a family where they just suffered a trauma because they had adopted a little boy. So they had a 2-year-old boy.
Mm-hmm.
Then they adopted another little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, I don't know if it's changed, but back then the birth mother had 6 months to change her mind.
Oh,
and
wow.
She changed her mind.
Oh,
so they had to hand this little girl back that they'd been looking after for months.
Oh.
And I was the replacement for that loss.
Oh, okay.
And then when we lived in Sierra Leone, I woke up one morning and saw flames coming in my bedroom wall.
Oh my gosh.
It was a house fire, so I got to tell everyone about that. And then when I was 9 and we lived in Hong Kong, I was sent to boarding school in England. And I was sent to my brother's boarding school. Mm-hmm. So it was a boys' boarding school.
What? How did they even allow you in?
Well, they had day girls who would come in for the lessons during the day and then they'd go home.
Oh, okay.
So I just happened to be the only one that stayed there after all the girls went home. And so I was teased mercilessly by those
I was going to
boys.
say, that sounds terrifying. I mean, truly.
It was pretty bad. So there was that. And then in my teenage years, both my parents became alcoholics. So life at home was just hell.
Whoa. Okay. I feel like you just gave I need to move over. I feel like you just gave me 10 different stories. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on, I'm sure you're going to explain, they're all yours.
They are.
Wow.
And I guess it happened for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think things happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, my reason, I didn't realize my reason until I was in my early 40s.
Sure.
But life just continued. So I moved out to the States 2 years after my mother had died. Mm-hmm. I'd known my birth mother. I met my birth mother when I was 17. So I kind of had 2 years of overlap with my mother's there, which was interesting. And moved out to the state when I was 21 because my husband-to-be had moved out here. And I just carried on with life. I just got a job. I was a software engineer. I had 2 boys. I just didn't realize that I was carrying everything. I didn't realize that we hold on to everything from our childhood. And it was this one event with 2 other mothers at my boys' school. And these mothers were not like me because I was really scared on the inside. I had PTSD from my dad's short temper and from the alcoholism. So I was always trying to keep myself and my boys safe. My mind would play tricks all the time. It was always working out, well, how can I stay safe? And I was just very reactionary and very highly strung. Mm-hmm. But I didn't really realize that was the case until this one event, right? So these 2 women who were self-confident, self-assured women, authority women in my mind, they told me I'd done something wrong. And my mind just spun out of control. I just could not stop it spinning. It went over and over, what they'd said, what I said, what I did, what I could have done differently, just all those different permutations that the monkey mind goes through. Mm-hmm. And it went through that for 3 whole days and nights. Oh, wow. And I just could not stop it. And it was at the end of that, I realized, okay, this is not normal. Mm-hmm. There wasn't anyone else I knew who would have reacted so intently to something that wasn't really that big a deal. Uh-huh. And I also realized it felt a little bit like how I would react when my dad would tell me I'd done something wrong.
Oh, interesting.
So that was the little opening that, maybe my childhood is still affecting me in some way that I had no idea about at that point. Uh-huh. But that's when I realized, okay, I need to do something. I have to change. Mm-hmm. And so that was where it started.
The start of it. Wow. Okay. So I'm curious. I want to go back to what you said about when you were in the womb and the way you were born. Did they give you any insight or do you have any information? Were you kind of squished up that way with your leg and your foot because of there just wasn't enough space? Was your birth mother very small? Or why do you feel or why did they tell you that happened?
That's a good question. I mean, I didn't find out about it until I was 17. I had kind of pain on and off in the top of my right foot, but I had no idea what it was about. And I realized later there was probably something to do with that.
Yeah.
But the only thing I can think of, and she's not small, she's my size, is that, or the only thing that she has thought of or told me about is that she didn't realize she was pregnant. So she left by ship. Right back then, you didn't fly so much.
Yeah.
She was a traveler, solo traveler like you are. So she left New Zealand by ship to go back to go up to Canada, actually. And then she hitchhiked across Canada on her own.
Oh my gosh.
In the winter.
Wow.
But along the way, she thought she was seasick.
Oh.
And she actually wasn't. It was morning sickness. So she took medication for that.
Oh, interesting.
And she's wondered if perhaps she did write to the company and they said, of course not. That couldn't cause anything like that.
Of course, yeah.
But that's the one thing that she questions. So,
oh, interesting. Yeah, because I always wonder too, I've read different things about, generational trauma and how it can like manifest itself and it can like stay in our bodies because of the way women's bodies are and how, the eggs that we have as babies are like have been in us, right? So then it's like, I was technically like in my mom's body when my mom was in her mother's womb. And that's just so, but it makes me curious when I hear things like that. And so that was why I asked them.
Well, the really interesting part of that story is that when my birth mother gave me away for adoption, she didn't know that her mother had also given a child away for adoption.
Whoa.
She found out about that later.
Interesting.
So that was really interesting. So in that regard, that did go through another generation, which is, very interesting.
That is really interesting. Wow. Okay. So after all of these different things, so I mean, first of all, I would be absolutely just, an awful person in general if I didn't ask you about finding your mother on the bathroom floor. That had to be awful and very, very traumatic.
Yes, that was the biggest trauma of them all. Now, I've worked through it now, so it's clearly not a trigger for me. It's just the story. So you're not going to get a lot of emotion from me about it. That's part of the healing journey. But yes, at the time, it really was huge. I was the only person there. My brother was at his girlfriend's house, and it was a new girlfriend, so I didn't know where that was. My dad was working in Saudi Arabia. So I was the only one home when I found her. And it was a bit of a mess. She'd had throat and lung cancer from drinking and smoking a lot for too long. And one of the tumors in her throat burst. So
wow.
Yeah, it was a bit of a mess.
Oh my gosh. I am so sorry. That sounds awful.
Yeah, but I just suppressed it. That's what somewhat of a British trait, right? We don't really talk about emotions at all. So I just continued on with life the way I knew how to live life, which was suppressing it all and just carrying on, but not realizing that it stays inside of our body.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? Like I feel like it's become so much more common to learn about all of these things and the way our body holds emotions and the way every part of us is so interconnected and intertwined. But it is so crazy how we can, push things aside and push things away almost to the point that we forget them. But then ultimately it manifests itself in some other way, right?
Right. We push it into our subconscious mind, which I think at this point is our body. It's the connective tissue of our body. And yes, we kind of hide it there until we're ready to look at it. Yeah. And then we can release it. So that's kind of been my whole journey for the last 15 to 20 years.
Wow. And so it was this moment with these other women who said something just kind of, I mean, if someone said to you the same thing to you today, you'd probably be like, okay, whatever.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. It was my decision and it's okay. Whatever happens. Yes.
Yeah. So when you finally realized after these 3 days of mulling over this comment, what were the steps or what did you decide? What was this moment that you had this moment where you said, okay, wait, this is not normal the way I'm reacting?
Right. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea. I just knew I was on a search at that point. And it happened to be in that time frame, I went to a doctor's appointment. Now, this doctor, he was a holistic physician, right? So he had more tools in his toolbox than most doctors do. And he knew me. He was one of the parents at school. So he knew
Okay.
that my life wasn't that stressful. I was a stay-at-home mother, 2 healthy young boys. And he recognized how stressed I was. And he asked me on a scale of 0 to 10 what my stress level was. And I said 8.
Okay.
And then he asked me why. And it was that question, why am I so stressed still? And I realized it was finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19. Because the tears from those 2 decades earlier was still just under the surface.
Yeah.
All those years later, I just hadn't dealt with them. I hadn't let them loose. And so he happened to know this technique that's called EFT.
Oh, okay.
Short for emotional freedom technique or tapping. And he tapped with me about my mother's death for about 15 minutes.
Wow.
And I walked away being able to tell the story in my mind for the first time ever without the tears there.
Wow.
And that's when I realized we hold those memories and those emotions physically in our body and we can let them go.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was wild for me. I had no idea that was possible. So that was the start of my journey there.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy to think only 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a huge difference. Now, I had to go back to my mother's story again because
I'm sure.
it's in layers, right? So we just let go of those top layers, those top emotions, the tears that were right on the surface.
Yeah.
And I would go back to it again and again to clean out the wounds, because as the subconscious mind opens up, you start to become aware of more details that you had suppressed before. Right. So the story becomes more of a story. You remember details of the story. For example, after the next, later on that morning, when I'd finally got my brother home, he came with his girlfriend who I'd never met before. It's like this new young lady in my house with my dead mother upstairs. And she asked me if I wanted a cup of coffee. She made a cup of coffee, and I never really liked coffee. I'm not a coffee person. And when I had it, I always wanted sugar and milk in it. And she gave me a black coffee, and I was annoyed with her at that point, but I'd totally forgotten that whole incident, the whole experience, because I had all the bigger issues, right? The bigger emotions from my mother's death itself. But as I cleared those out, I remembered, oh, yes, that happened. And I didn't like that. So I worked through that as well. And that's the way it works.
Wow. Interesting. So as you worked through all this, what was next?
Well, I went home after the doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure that what had happened really happened, Was it a fluke? A one-off?
Sure, yeah.
So I went online. I learned everything I could about EFT because it was given away by Gary Craig for free. So anyone could go online and learn about it. And I did. And then I wanted to try it out on something that I could test it with, because I was a software engineer, have an engineering mind. I don't want to waste my time on something that's not going to work. So at the time, I had a 17-year-old cat at home. And this cat had been bred from my mother's cats. That we had given to another breeder after she had died. So this cat meant a lot to me. And he was starting to fail. So I'd been told we had to give him a daily saline shot. So an injection of saline solution. First time I gave him that shot, my hand was shaking so badly. I was just so afraid of giving him the shot, of hurting him, of something going wrong, that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do it every day because it was too stressful on top of all my other stresses. So I thought, well, let me try this technique out. So I tapped about every aspect of it, which is something you want to do with EFT. So I tapped about my hand shaking, which was the present thing. I tapped about my fear of hurting my cat and the fear that I wasn't going to be able to do it every day, which was kind of the future. And then I went to the past and I tapped about every memory I could remember from having the injections that I had had in my lifetime, which was a lot because I've been all over the world. And the next day, when I gave him that shot, the needle slid right in.
Wow.
All that fear that had been living inside of me the day before had totally disappeared.
Oh my gosh.
And that's when I thought, okay, I want to be there. That's where I want to be, on the other side of all those negative emotions and those memories. So that's where I really started the journty. And I started asking myself every day, multiple times a day, which is easier to do now because we have phones to remind us. I'd ask myself, how am I feeling right now? And I would give words to that. I would say, I'm feeling sad or angry or frustrated, which allows you to kind of separate, right? You no longer are sad you are sad, but you can put a little separation in there. I know I'm sad.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me. I'm feeling sad.
Uh-huh.
And you need that little separation in there in order to work on the sadness. So then I would tap, and I would, when you're tapping, you're actually acknowledging your truth.
Okay.
And that's when the release happens. So if I'm tapping, I'm feeling sad. The tapping actually provides an interrupt into the nervous system.
Okay.
So if you're feeling sad, you probably feel it in the same place. You're feeling the same tension in different places in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And the tapping interrupts the way you normally work on sadness.
Okay.
And starts to release that energy.
Uh-huh.
So I would bring myself back to peace, and then I'd carry on with my day. Mm-hmm. Ask myself again, tap again, bring myself back to peace. And I would just do that day after day. And I noticed that I started to become more peaceful on the inside, which was really fun because it's not only you're peaceful on the inside, but things around you change too. Yeah. So like as the mother in a family, when you're peaceful, the family tends to be peaceful.
Yeah.
So it changed family life, which was great.
Oh my gosh.
And it started going so well and things started moving so much. I wanted more and I wanted it faster.
Okay.
So I'd heard that you could write down all the traumas from life and just work through them one after another. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. I had multiple sheets of paper, lots of things to work on. Mm-hmm. And I did one each night for about an hour to an hour and a half of tapping each night.
Okay.
Until it had released, until I could just talk through the story of what happened with no emotions left. And things just really started to change fast. I became peaceful. I just wasn't triggered the way I used to be. Mm-hmm. And the thoughts in my mind that used to be there disappeared. Wow. So like I used to be very judgmental and self-critical. Mm-hmm. Those thoughts disappeared. And I realized they'd been my dad's thoughts, my dad's words that I had taken on as my own and just replayed them. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't see that until they disappeared.
Dang, this is crazy. Because I know like this much about EFT. So not only do I have so many questions about the practice in and of itself, but I'm also just fascinated by what your results have been.
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy. So ask.
So, okay, I've done it only like a few times with like, someone online. So are you only tapping on your head and your face?
There's 9 points. It's the same points.
Oh, okay.
We're always tapping on the same points.
Okay.
I don't recommend those online videos where it's kind of like a script where you're saying what they say. You really have to use your own words.
Okay.
Because those are the ones that are stored inside of you.
Okay.
So that's where the power is. And it's also working on the negative. It's only the negative that is stored in the body. So we don't have to have positive affirmations. A lot of people online using EFT have gone more to the positive. But because of further on in my story, which we haven't got to yet, I know that it's only the tension and the negative that's stored in the body. And that's what we need to find and release.
Okay. Well then because I'm certainly curious. One of the things that you said, like really was a question that was already formulating in my head was about like the negative, like self-talk, like the negative things that we can say to ourselves or about ourselves in our minds or even out loud. I'm sure, that is interesting to me to, get rid of those types of thoughts and stores or energy and all of it in my brain.
Yeah. Well, the craziest thing to me after doing a lot of the work already, right? This is not something I did at the beginning because I didn't really realize that I hated myself. But I got to the place where I realized I hate myself. So then I tapped on that phrase. I hate myself. I probably tapped on it for several hours over a period of weeks. Wow. So it was a lot of work. But it got to the place where they're just 3 words. They don't mean anything. There's no longer any attachment to that thought inside of me. They're just, I hate myself, just 3 words. And then the thought just disappeared. And it never comes up. I never think that thought anymore.
Wow. Okay. I'm a believer. I'm in. Keep talking. I want to know more.
Okay. Well, this was just the first step in my journey was using EFT. And as I said, what I realized it's doing, it's opening up our subconscious mind, which at the same time deepens our self-awareness.
So is it the tapping that opens up the subconscious mind, or is it that it breaks up the thought as you're saying it as you're tapping?
It's all of it.
Okay.
Because part of the tapping is as you tap on something that's happening now, or even a memory that you're bringing to mind, other memories of similar feelings or similar events will come to mind, which that's the opening of the subconscious mind, right?
Crazy.
Yeah. So you can go deeper and deeper into your past, which is opening the subconscious mind. So yes, it all works as one, but we become more self-aware. So when I started this journey, I was not very self-aware. I had so many defenses that I couldn't feel. I didn't know how I felt, right? I didn't know what my emotion was in any moment. I would defer to someone else all the time, or I'd say I'm fine because I didn't want to feel how I felt. But as I did more of this work, I became aware of my emotions. Then I became aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions.
Ooh, okay.
So like if you're feeling frustrated, can you tell where you feel frustration and how it feels in your body?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, my first thought would be like, I'm like that feeling, like in your forehead.
Okay, that's great. That's one place. There's probably other places as well. So that's being aware of the physical sensation underneath the emotion.
Okay.
Most of us are not aware. We've suppressed that again. We learn it as children. That's how we learn emotions as children, right? Someone will say we're sad or we're angry and we'll associate the word with how we're feeling. But then we kind of suppress the feelings and we just use the word.
Right.
So this is kind of reversing that process. So once I was aware at that level, I didn't need to use EFT as much. I could have tapped on, I feel my frustration in my forehead, and that would help. But I was just learning to feel my feelings. So I just worked on feeling those sensations.
Oh, okay.
Focusing on them, just allowing them, not trying to change them in any way. So kind of like EFT, right? With EFT, you're telling your truth, exactly how you feel. And once it's fully accepted, it releases.
And can you physically feel it release?
Yes.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Ooh, okay. Because that's like the best part of anything. You know, when like you're getting a trigger point massage or something, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, they got it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's part of the path. It felt so good. I just almost couldn't stop doing it because it just felt so good to release this old tension.
Yeah, I bet.
So I started working on the sensations rather than the thoughts.
Okay.
So it's kind of deeper into the body. So I'd worked through all my childhood at this point. So I would lay on the sofa and I would bring collective traumas to mind. Like things like 9/11, right? You went through it. I went through it. We all went through it. We had a different experience of it.
Right.
So I just bring those memories to mind and just allow the sensations or the emotions to release. And it felt really good.
Wow. You know, it's funny that you bring that up like that, like a collective trauma, because, you know, during COVID, right? I mean, that's another collective trauma, right? And I remember it was the summer of 2021, my mom and I were itching to get out, get anywhere. And our family is Greek and Greece was open for tourism. So we said, okay, let's go. So she and I went, and I remember one day we were sitting at a cafe and I looked around and I said, do you know what I just realized? And she said, what? And I said, you know, because there were not a lot of American tourists in Greece that summer, but there were a lot of tourists in Greece that summer. So we were hearing languages like, you know, every language under the sun, especially a lot of Europeans and Australians were, I would say, the majority of the tourists aside from us. And I said, I just realized that like every single person here has their own story from COVID, from the last year and a half. Everyone's got their own, like we all went through the same thing, but have a different experience. And it was just such a wild acknowledgement for me in that moment. Because, you know, we can be so caught up in like who we are and our own lives and our own problems and all the things. But I was like, dang, this wasn't just like, we were like, oh, we got to get out of here. We feel like we've been caged animals. But I was like, these people probably felt the same. That's why they're here. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how the collective traumas work. So we all really need to do our own release work around that to acknowledge what we went through and feel it and let it release. Yeah. So I worked through those. And at some point while I was lying on the sofa, actually doing this release work, I realized I could keep my awareness inside my body after the tension released. It's a weird thing to say, you know, that's the way I explain it.
Yeah. I'm trying to envision this. So keep sharing.
Okay. So let's do an example here.
Okay.
An experiment. So tell me how your right knee feels right now.
It feels fine. Normal.
Okay. So before you put that word normal to it, or it feels fine, you had to go to your knee and sense it, right? And then you came out of your knee and you put words to it.
I did, yeah.
Right. So what I'm doing is I'm going inside and sensing and staying in there.
Oh.
And feeling. So that's what I realized I was doing. And then I was just playing with it because I'd never heard about it before. I didn't know what I was doing. So I tried to see if I could move my awareness around inside. And I could. And I could find a place with tension and I could compare it. It felt tense compared to a place with no tension.
Sure, yeah.
So then I would focus on it. Same thing that I was doing with the sensations, same as with EFT, but now at a deeper level. I would focus on it. And my power of focus at this point had honed over these years. So I could focus like a laser beam and I could feel it release.
Oh.
So then I'd do it again and again and again until like I'd feel some relief.
Okay. I need to do that with this right shoulder.
Yes. Yeah.
I was thinking this morning, I'm like, I need a massage. I'm like, been sitting at the computer too much.
So then I just kept playing. I kept moving my awareness around, feeling the tension, releasing it. And eventually, it took many, many months, but eventually I put my awareness inside my head, which was huge because the pain in my left cheek that I became aware of was almost unbearable. It was so intense. And it had been there my whole life because it's connected through the connective tissue to my right foot.
Oh, dang.
I know.
Oh, that is wild.
Yeah, and I was 50 at this point. So it'd been there for 50 years, stuck in my subconscious.
Wow.
But I hadn't been aware of it. And so now I was aware of it and I work on it just a second at a time because it was so intense. And, at this point it's pretty much gone. And it's connected to the tension in my right neck and then kind of all the way down. So I work on a little bit at a time. When I was able to start working on this one day, I was actually in Starbucks at the time. And I was just doing this while I was waiting for other people. And I actually heard something release. I heard and felt something release. And it sounded and it felt like old fabric ripping.
Oh, okay.
Which was a little scary at the time.
I bet. Yeah. I was thinking like, okay, that can be kind of loud. Oh my gosh.
So I went home and researched and I realized it was an adhesion in the connective tissue that had released.
Whoa.
So it was a good thing, not a bad thing. And so I kept going. So over the years, I actually got to the place where I could actually feel my skull bones relax.
Dang.
Now I hadn't known they weren't relaxed before. Right? Just like the thoughts. I hadn't known those thoughts had been my dad's until they'd gone, until my skull had relaxed. And I eventually got some x-rays taken, just regular orthodontic x-rays, and looked back at the old ones because now I had a reason to, right? Because I knew things were changing. And I could see the difference. I could see that my jaw had centered, my eye sockets had shifted, my neck has straightened, and I've grown 3/4 of an inch because of that release of the burden.
No way.
Yes.
Oh
Crazy.
my, that's a lot. That's a significant amount.
It is in your 50s, I think.
Well, yeah, you know, okay, I'm 47 and the last time I went to the doctor, I have my entire life, like since I stopped growing, I was like always like 5'5" 3/4. And I would always claim that. I'm like, I'm 5'5" 3/4. I'm almost 5'6". And at 5'6" is where I was at. I was like 5'5" and like a little bit. I was like, what happened to that 3/4? Where are we at?
And I always used to be 5'4"1/4, and I always counted that 1/4 of an inch. But now I'm 5'5".
Wow.
And it was important to me because I always used to want to be a policewoman in England.
Okay.
And at the time you had to be 5'6" to be a policewoman. And it's like, I wasn't there.
You're like hanging upside down at night, like trying to stretch like a bat. Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I think we shrink as we age because we hold so much tension and we think the same thoughts over and over again. And it just compresses those adhesions in the connective tissue. It just tightens it down and it shrinks us.
Yeah.
So this work releases that and it allows us to grow again, to become our true blueprint.
I'm just mind blown right now. This is so cool. So I have a question. I was thinking about this as you were talking about, different emotions. And one of the things that I've come to acknowledge more over the last few years is comfort within emotions. And what I mean by that is like, I actively recognized one day that like, even though I don't want to be sad, I am comfortable with sadness. And I was like, that's kind of like weird. And that's a story that I want to rewrite, because I don't want to, just assume that something is going to make me sad, or that, sadness is, what I should expect. I think that's probably what it is. Like, is that like what I should expect? So I thought about that, and I thought how, I feel like as humans, it probably is kind of easy for us to default to emotions that we've experienced before, regardless of if they're good or bad, because there's a level of comfort there, because it's almost like we know what to expect.
Yes, we're conditioned to expect it, or we're conditioned to feel that emotion. Mm-hmm. But those negative emotions are simply energy that is stuck in the body from all those years ago and from replaying it over and over again. Yeah. So yes, it's a part of us, but we can let it go. Mm-hmm. So, there's nuance here in the words. So we don't necessarily want to be comfortable in it, but we want to accept it. Mm-hmm. We want to acknowledge that the sadness is there, and we want to feel it. Yeah. We want to allow ourselves to feel it. And that takes some practice. It sounds so simple, right? We'll just feel sadness, just feel it. Mm-hmm. But you really actually have to sit in it and relax into the sensations and the emotion and allow the energy to release. That's how the energy releases, once it's fully acknowledged and accepted enough that we can relax into it. Mm-hmm. Then the energy leaves. And it takes doing multiple times, right? Each time you notice when you're sad, you do this. And then over time, you stop being sad.
Yeah.
Or angry, or frustrated, or any of those feelings. Mm-hmm. It just takes work. And then you're no longer triggered by the things that used to make you that way.
Yeah.
And that's where you find inner peace.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So how has this practice, aside from, you already mentioned that you were like more peaceful, and, if moms, it's kind of like, happy wife, happy life, right? I mean, that saying's there for a reason, right? So your household was calmer. People were like noticing like, oh, like mom seems good. All right. So what are the other positives that have come from this year's long practice now?
Okay. Well, there's multiple different aspects to that too, right? There's the inner. Mm-hmm. So my physical body has changed. Mm-hmm. My posture has changed. It's more confident. I can feel the movements in my body as I do this work. Mm-hmm. The tension in my head has changed. So I can sing notes now that I couldn't sing before, right? Because our head is the echo chamber for our voice. Mm-hmm. So as the head is less tense, the voice is going to be different. Okay. So that's really fun.
Yeah, for me. That's neat. Are you a singer?
No.
Oh, okay. So you're just a shower singer then, yes. Right? Yes. Okay. Car singer. Perfect.
Yes. But there were notes I physically couldn't sing before. Uh-huh. And now I can. So neat. That's really fun. My body is more balanced. Mm-hmm. So, it used to be obviously I stood straight, but I had scoliosis. So it wasn't equilibrium, but it was balanced. Now it's becoming more equilibrium. Okay. So that's good. I can not only hear music with my ears, but I can feel it in my body, because that resistance inside my body has gone. So that makes listening to music a lot more fun.
Yeah, I bet.
A lot more sensuous even. Yeah. But it also means, right, when I'm listening to people talk, I get more feedback. I get more nuance in what's going on with how they're speaking and what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Because so as within, so without.
Is it more like you are able to pick up on what people are not verbalizing?
Yes. When we tell a lie, we hold ourselves differently because we don't want to feel that lie inside, right? So I can tell where I'm holding tension in my body, so I can see that more easily in other people as well. Okay. Right, which is as within, so without. Mm-hmm. So that's a change too. Obviously, I'm doing things that I would not have done before. There's no way I would have been on a podcast.
Oh, back then. Yeah.
And I've written a book, and I work with other people. So there's a lot of those things that have changed as well.
Oh my gosh, I bet. So how did you go about sharing with your family or friends or even your sons, like when you were doing all of this and having all of these realizations and feelings and feeling lighter and more peaceful and all the things, like, were you able to articulate that? And was it welcomed, or were people like, okay, this is a little woo woo?
That's a really good question. Yeah, definitely a little woo woo. I didn't share a lot of it because it wasn't their journey. It was my journey.
Sure.
They could experience the changes. They don't want to do tapping. My boys are in their 20s now, but as teenagers, they didn't want to do it. But, I think one day they might do that or something similar, because they don't have the traumas that I had. They have some, but not the ones I had. And my husband had a really nice upbringing, right? He has no desire or no need to do this work, which I found, I don't know, you've probably found that too with your guests, that those who do this work have had traumas or something in childhood.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting though, because I feel like trauma is, unfortunately one of those overused words these days. And what I mean by that is I feel like there are some words that have very big, very real, very life-altering meanings that are being used much too flippantly. And, it's like somebody being mean to you, like that's not trauma. That's just, you ran into an asshole, I mean,
hang on, let me come in here.
Yes, please do.
Because I've realized that, over these years of doing this work, that all of that gets stored inside of us. So it doesn't matter whether it's a big trauma or little trauma, whether it's a phrase that someone said to you, all of that. And the conditioning, we're so conditioned to do the things we do. All of that gets stored inside of us, in our tissues and our bones. Because that's what I'm releasing now, right? I'm releasing tension inside of my bones, inside of my skull, that I had no idea was there. And I believe it's from all that conditioning over the years. So to me, I could call it all trauma, or I could call it none of it trauma, but it's all stored in our body. So I don't dismiss anything that anyone's been through. Sure. It's still stored inside and it's affecting us. We just don't realize it's affecting us. Until we do this work.
I'm agreeing with that, because it is interesting. I think just as, sometimes when somebody says something to you and it's something that you think about forever, right? Like, and you're just like, wow, that really, and it could be something so simple as like someone being like, I love you have the most beautiful eyes. And you're like, oh, thanks. And maybe, for whatever reason, that moment stuck with you. And even 20 years later, you're like, oh, that was so nice of them to say that. And for them, they were just like, noticed something, made a compliment. Well, I think it's the same thing with like negative things, right? Like somebody could say something that's relatively benign. Like, oh, I don't like your black shirt. But like, you might carry that and be like, oh my God, does that mean black looks terrible on me? Like, should I not wear black anymore? And you might think about that every time you wear black for like the rest of your life. So I get that like these little things can stick.
Yeah. And I think it depends on who we are and what we've been through. So let me give you an example. Yeah. So my dad had such a vicious temper. Like he would just snap and become seething. I mean, spittle would come out of his mouth. He was so angry. So that was my understanding of someone being angry. Now my boys never had that. And they would come home from school saying that their teacher was angry and was shouting at them. And I would laugh because I know the teachers, right? But their experience of anger, it's such a different experience, their spectrum, right? So for them, that seemed like it was angry or anger. And to me, it was nothing, because my spectrum was so big compared to theirs. So I think you have to walk in the other person's shoes to really be able to tell what it is.
I mean, it's absolutely, experiences what changes everything. I mean, I was having a conversation over the weekend and we were talking about how, it's so easy to say like, oh, well, if that were me, I would do this. And it's the most wrong, thought ever, because anytime you end up in that situation, you don't ever do what you think you said you were going to do. You do something completely different because it's now finally your reality.
Yes. So another part of the journey that I didn't mention is that every time I released tension somewhere, it also released in my neck, which was really interesting for me. I mean, I don't know quite why still, but in the Bible, I'm not a religious person, but in the Bible, stiff-necked people is in there like 18 times.
Oh, really?
Stiff-necked people. It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So over the years, my neck has loosened and I can move it in ways that I couldn't before because it was stuck on the right here. So what I've realized is that as you release the past, you're able to see from different perspectives, both mentally, but also physically, right? It goes hand in hand, I believe. Okay. So we're able to put ourselves in other people's shoes and see from their perspective in a way that you couldn't before. Yeah. Because you had all this other, or I had all this other, tension and resistance inside of me. So that's a really cool thing too, to experience.
I bet. And it's so important, because it's so easy to judge, right? And so if you haven't ever had that same experience with somebody, I feel like it's even easier to judge because you truly don't know what you would do because you've never been in their shoes. But if you can, like you said, kind of have that extra flexibility, it probably makes you a better friend.
Yeah. Yeah. You have compassion and empathy where you might not have done before. And you notice that along the journey. I mean, I noticed that with EFT, right? As I was tapping about my mom and my dad's stuff, I would come to an understanding of why they did what they did, right? So the compassion and empathy just arose naturally as the big emotions inside of me had released.
Okay, so now you're out, you're talking about this, you're sharing your story. I mean, I'm clearly just absolutely blown away by all of this. And so the logical next question is like, how do I start on this journey of my own?
Just the same way. Start asking yourself during the day, how do I feel right now? And answer yourself, right? So go inside, notice what you're feeling, tell yourself what you're feeling. So do that translation of the senses into words. And that's the first step. And then, I recommend EFT. There are other techniques that I'm sure work similarly. EFT has the physical component, which I think is really important. So learn something like that. I have a video on my YouTube channel I put up recently of all the information on how to use EFT.
Okay, cool.
And start using it.
Yeah.
If you really want to go deep, write down everything from your life and start working through it one at a time.
This is crazy. So last week I recorded an episode with a woman, and I'm going to connect you to after, because I just feel like if you don't already know each other, you need to, because she talks a lot about forgiveness and teaching people how to forgive. Because it's not something that we're, people tell you like, oh, forgive and forget, or forgive and let it go. But it's like, okay, how do I do that? So she's come up with this process for being able to do the act, like forgiveness as an act, but it's all within you. And I feel like this so goes hand in hand. I mean, so much so, like, I almost want to release these episodes like on the same day, because I'm like, listen to both. You're going to learn so much. It's going to change your life.
I just released a video about forgiveness just this last week.
Oh my God. How funny. See, I swear to God, this is my favorite thing about podcasting, is that like all the right people come to me as they're meant to. Every guest chooses their time, their day, but then it all works out because it's just, I don't know. I love it. The universe works in magical ways. This is so cool. So do you actually teach this? Is this something you teach, or is this just kind of like, hey, this changed my life, I need to share this?
Everything. Yeah, I have a virtual retreat coming up in July.
Oh, cool.
That it's going to be 3 days of working through one big loss that you've had, working through all the aspects to experience the shift. Right? You've got to do enough to experience the shift, and then you realize, then you understand, and you know that those memories and those emotions are just energy stuck in your body. So yes, I teach that. I teach. I have a PDF download on my website that goes through the different steps. I have my book and workbook that anyone can do on their own. I have a YouTube channel which shares a lot of the information. I want people to do the work.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. I had no idea how powerful we were, that we could do these things. So I want other people to know that and to do the work, right? Because I think we can change the world. I think this work can change the world.
I totally am I haven't even done it yet, and I'm in so agreement, because I'm like such a believer in energy. And I feel like, energy just drives everything that I do and every decision that I make. And I try to be so like in alignment with myself, as self-aware as I can be. But hearing all of this, and when you were talking about self-awareness and how it made you more aware, and I was like, am I not as self-aware as I thought I was becoming? Like, what's going on? I need to do this.
A lot of people talk about self-awareness as like the mind, being aware of, aware of the things you like and the things you don't like. But it goes deeper, right? It goes into the physical body itself. So there are deeper levels of awareness, self-awareness.
Yeah. Well, and I loved what you talked about with like going into that part of your body, like taking your mind into that part of your body, because while I know we've all done it, right? Because like you said, like, tell me, how does your knee feel, right? I mean, think about how many times someone goes to the doctor, like, okay, well, how's your stomach feel? Or how does your back feel? But when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so interesting. And then to think like, okay, I'm going to stay in that spot. That
Right.
really got me going.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
Because we want to come out as soon as we come out, we go back into our thinking mind. So we have to come out of the thinking mind, back into the sensing mind, and just feel. But yeah, you can do it.
Awesome. So how can people find you and get in touch with you? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are feeling like me, and I'm like, where can I order this book? How can I learn more? Let's turn on YouTube right now.
Again, my website's just my name, annhince.com, and the x-rays are on there. So you can look at the x-rays and see the changes. Oh, cool. I'm also very active on Facebook and YouTube. So any of those places. And I do one-on-one work for people who want more hand holding as they work through their traumas. So I do that too.
Amazing. God, thank you so much for sharing all of this.
You're welcome. It was great. Thanks for the conversation.
Oh my gosh, that was truly amazing. So everybody, all of Ann's information will be in the show notes. And for everyone who's listening, as always, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. And as always, please remember to like, follow, share, subscribe, comment, all the good things. I love hearing your thoughts. Thanks again, Ann. And we will see everybody next week. Bye.